Would anybody like to start? Anything that's coming up for anybody from the retreat we've just finished, or from today? Anything at all? As I keep saying, for those of you who have been with the teaching for some time, use this opportunity to just ask any questions that might be coming up and see whether you can find a bit more clarity at the intellectual level, because we're trying to help the thinking mind, which operates as the intellect, to clear up the confusion that it has been given throughout its life for no fault of its own. And so this is an intellectual process to begin with, but we always check it with direct experience. That's why we do the self-inquiries, or we just sit in silence and look at the awareness, or from the awareness. So we're always using these two aspects of ourself, the intellectual aspect and the direct awareness aspect.
On Friday, you introduced this beautiful concept that I've been thinking of ever since. You said you seduce the mind. I just love that way that you said that, and I took it to mean that you want to seduce the mind to feel safe enough to get out of the loop of thinking and concepts and all that kind of stuff. I just wondered if you could say more about it and unpack that idea more, because I just love that idea.
Thanks, John, because I'd forgotten I'd said that, and I think it was probably the first time I'd said it like that, because it keeps changing quite a lot for me at the moment. So that's exactly what I meant. But if we understand what this word mind means, I'm going to use the concepts of my teachers. So mind is basically a collection of thoughts, thought structures, as thinking, and we call that intellect. But then there are other aspects of the mind which we can call creative mind, working mind, intuitive mind, etc. So what we're referring to in the sense of seducing the thinking mind into not coming out of the loop, because the thinking mind can't come out of the loop. The loop is actually the nature of the thinking mind. And specifically the loop is conceptualizing as thought, and more specifically it is in duality, because every thought has its opposite thought. So we're seducing the mind to surrender to its other aspect, which is the intuitive aspect or the working aspect, for example. And then whole mind, or non-split mind, whatever you want to call it, the mind of God, can then inform the thinking mind. The thinking mind is needing and wanting clarity, which it can't actually find in totality. The intellectual concepts give it some clarity, but it still remains in the loop. So that's why we try and use direct experience. And direct experience is being understood by this other aspect of the mind, the intuitive mind. And then when there's no thoughts whatsoever, there's no awareness of objects, we can say there's no mind in that sense. There's just a state of direct awareness, but there's no thinking, there's no conceptualizing, and there's no recognition of objects, whether they be sense objects, thought objects, or objects that are arising as experience. So this idea of seducing the mind has come to me recently, because the mind is often seen as the enemy. And specifically it's because the thinking mind has created the suffering that most of us seekers are trying to get out of. The psychological, emotional suffering that we are trying to get out of is purely from the thinking mind. And it's purely these two beliefs that we have. I'll just repeat it for those who are new. The belief that we are separate from each other, that we are separate from the source of what we are, God, consciousness or love, presence, whatever you want to call it. And the second core belief, which is that we are the authors